Hello guys, we have another game with the black pieces. We are now 999. We're 1 point away from 1,000 against Sir Schaefer, who I thought was going to abandon the game, but finally makes a move d4. We're just going to respond with knight f6. He responds with knight f3. We're going to play c5, as you've seen in the past, offering up this free pawn. He develops a bishop and targets our knight immediately. Very aggressive. I don't really care, I guess. The downside of his move is that it weakens the b2 square. So in light of that, I'm going to do what you've seen me do in other games. I'm going to bring out the queen early for the specific purpose of targeting a weakness that was just made on move 3. And my queen is unassailable, it's not vulnerable to attacks. And when he spends time addressing this threat, I can continue normal development. There are moves, like whenever they bring their bishop out early, you always have moves like knight e4, jumping into the center with that tempo. Okay, so he goes b3 to address the threat. It doesn't threaten anything for him. The downside is it weakens dark squares, which is fine. So I'm just going to develop my knight. Now I have both my knights developed, and I'm putting extra pressure on the central pawn. He gives up his dark square bishop for my knight in order to ruin my pawn structure. I could recapture. Either way is playable, but in light of faster development, I'm going to... It's not about the pawn islands, like creating one less pawn island. I just want the faster bishop development right now. He goes e3, defending his center and opening up his bishop's diagonal. I'm going to take this pawn with my flank pawn, which increases the power and scope of my bishop because he weakened the dark squares, so it's possible that using this diagonal could be good for me. And getting it out with check hastens my castling. Also, this double pawn provides a nice potential place for my knight. But of course, if he takes back with the pawn, he doesn't even take my pawn. He gambits a pawn for some reason, and tries to get me to take this one to develop his knight as well as control. Okay, so he was worried about the dark square diagonal, but I'm not going to take this pawn. Although if he takes back, I bring a bishop out, he brings a rook out, I add pressure with my queen, he defends with his queen. I don't know, maybe that you can win a pawn or something, but I'd rather take this pawn and ruin his pawn structure this way and leave this square blocked for his knight. That seems reasonable. So I'm going to take this pawn, and the thing is, if he takes back, I have check. And that looks really bad for him. Even if I didn't have that move, it looks bad for him. But considering I also have this follow-up, I'm just going to go for it. It comes with check. It's, he can't like put his bishop here and then castle because the queen covers. Because then let's say he wanted to castle and put a rook here and say, well, you're, misplaced or whatever. He can't do that. So I'm going to develop my bishop to its most active square. It also prepares castling. It also comes with a queen f2 check threat, which would push his king out to the side. And if we check then again with the bishop, it would push his king potentially to a light square, in which case we would like our light square bishop to have access. So anyway, he moves his queen to d5, central square. It's kind of early in the game, but my queen is, well, look at my queen. Who am I to say anything? The downside of this is it kind of vacates the white army. There's weird moves like this check, which forces bishop back, which would be deadly if I could put a rook on e8. So what does this move threaten? Let's get that out of the way first. I don't think it threatens anything. He's just trying to castle queenside, I imagine. But I just want a castle. My king is super safe with these doubled pawns, extra protection, and now that my rook can get here, he can't really castle, right? Because once I put a rook here and two things are hitting the bishop, even if he could castle, the bishop would hang. So he's going to have to stay tethered to the bishop. Queen's probably going to have to come back to protect the bishop because the knights can't reach it effectively. He can't castle because of the checks. This is always a threat. So he moves a pawn, which creates a one move threat. I can obviously drop back, but dropping back is like you have 5 seconds on the clock. That's the move you make. When you have all this time, you're going to look for more forcing, stronger counter moves, right? You don't care if he hits you if you have a good move. And so now that my rook's here, what else do we have? So let's go back to this check. Well, his king can't move, so he has to block with the bishop or the queen. If he blocks with the bishop, now you can give this check, and that's winning, so you can't do that. Check. If he blocks with the queen, I mean, you're up materials, so you could trade queens, but let's not trade queens, right? He's hitting our bishop, though, so we have to do something forcing. If we don't want to go check and trade queens, then what else do we have? Well, how about we develop our piece, control 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, touch 6 more squares instead of the 1, right? Coordinate and create a bigger counter threat. His threat's taking a bishop, our threat's checkmate, right? So we don't care about his threat. And now this check would change. His bishop's pinned. There's no more bishop back, so that removes an option for him. So now he only has queen back. So the puzzle is shifting, but you're keeping track of the pieces, and you're waiting for the opportunity till it clicks. That's all it is. Every move is observational jigsaw. So he moves his queen to defend the bishop. Okay, that's a clever square. I only really saw that one. So this is interesting. The downside is he's not developing. He's not getting closer to castling. And I can deflect his queen. D5 develops my bishop and hits the queen simultaneously. And if the queen takes it, it's checkmate, right? So I'm going to do that. If he takes my bishop with the queen, which he can take it with the queen or the pawn, it's still checkmate. So he can't abandon it. And if he goes queen d3, trying to get the queen trade and relieve pressure, I just take the queen because his bishop is pinned, right? So now his queen, in order to stay contact with the bishop, has to go to, let's say, b5. But what happens when I go a6? You can't maintain contact with the bishop, and you lose the queen, or checkmate is inevitable. So he does do what I expected and go to b5. By process of elimination, he figured out this is the only square that makes contact with the bishop and doesn't lose the queen in one turn. So you guys might be thinking, oh, let's go along with what he just said. Let's play a6. Queen has nowhere to go, and you checkmate him, right? But everything changes. Every move changes. And I didn't even notice that change until right now. When he moved his queen, I moved back. Let's go back, right? I move my rook. I threaten mate in 1. He moves his queen, defends. Immediately, the observation, another drawback of this move, other than the ones I mentioned, is it is no longer on the D file. Why is that relevant? Oh yeah, that was the only piece that could defend against checkmate. So I could have immediately gone queen c1 checkmate because the queen was the defender, right? Because the bishop is pinned and this diagonal's covered. Oh, but I had a different train of thought and I ran with it. And I went d5, missed checkmate on 1. So now he goes here. So I was going to tell you now, don't automatically go a6 because you have checkmate on 1, but you had it last move. So, where are we? Oh yeah. Checkmate in 1. There we go. That was a decent game. We're going to play again. We're finally above 1,000. We're now playing against Ivan Zamir, Russian School of Chess, 1069. He develops with e4, We go d6. He brings out the king's bishop, immediately putting pressure on our king side. We're going to develop our knight and immediately attack the pawn. He's going to solidify his center with d3, creating a nice pawn chain and opening up the scope for his bishop. We are going to go g6, and we're going to fianchetto our bishop, which is going to be very nice on this diagonal since he didn't put any pawns in the way to stop it. So he develops his bishop and hits our knight. We're just going to go bishop g7 and defend our knight. He goes f3. Maybe he's going to start a pawn storm like this. The downside of this is that it takes the square away from his pieces. Maybe I'm not castling there. So I'm going to actually play c6. And it may look like a weird move, but it actually prepares to pawn storm him on this side in case he wants to castle there. It also comes with tempo, for example, b5 here. I knew he would start pawn storming me, or I had an idea. That's why I didn't castle yet. And if he's going to continue attacking me, I don't want my king there. So he moves his bishop back to keep it safe. This is fine. I now want to continue my development by moving my knight to its most natural square. He does continue the pawn storm. That's fine with me. He's still not developing. Also, his king is not safer than mine by any, not by my calculations. And what else? Also, going back a little bit, I'm just noticing now that this entire time the b2 pawn was hanging, so I might have had tactics all along with just sacking my knight and then taking the pawn. The thing is, if he develops his knight and you take the rook, you're giving up 2 pieces, including your dark square bishop, so maybe I didn't have it, but now that we're in this position, do I have something else that's similar? I don't know. Hard to say. E5 is a move. Queen a5 might be a move. Queen b6 might be a move. Knight b6 might be a move. Knight c5 might be a move. h6 might be a move. There are so many. e5 might be a move. I have no idea. d5 might be a move. There's so many moves. I literally have no clue what to do. a5 might be a move. Yikes. But we don't want to close it down, maybe. Let's give him this check. We'll develop a piece with tempo. Okay, so he responds with the queen. So if I give a queen trade now, there's never an attack on my king. So that's an easy way to cop out. If I don't trade queens, then what am I doing with my queen there? So let's just trade queens because I can't defend it with a piece. So, and I don't want to move it back. So now he brings his knight here instead of here. That's fine. But now that he doesn't have queens, maybe I can get some tactics in at some point. But he created a lot of dark square weaknesses, so maybe I can try to get him to trade. This doesn't threaten anything. I'm going to ask the bishop what it wants to do since it's on my side of the board. You know, like get out of my side. Okay, so he gets out. That's fine. Because now that these pawns are in this standoff, anytime he pushes one, I could push the other and it interlocks. So that protects my king. This is a weird square that walks into potential e5s, although I don't need to. I am going to improve this knight and target this bishop and reroute this knight here and open up the diagonal for my bishop. I think it's a little more harmonious setup than the knights on these 2 squares where they were previously. So he pushes a pawn. What does this threaten? Maybe to open up my king's side, but there's not a real attack there. There's no queens and I'm adequately defended. But like I said, whichever one he pushes, As soon as they're on a one square standoff, you can push the other one, which I'm going to do. It happens to come with tempo in this case, but even if it didn't, it locks everything. So he retreats the bishop from the attack and even prepares possibly f4. That's fine. I'm probably going to sack material for no reason. Should I? I kind of just want to take this pawn and develop my bishop. He gets a bishop. I get a second pawn with tempo. But then he takes a knight and I take, and then I don't get this pawn because I don't have the tempo I wanted. So I'm not going to sack. Instead, I'm actually going to do what I said before and move this knight to this square, open up my bishop, and this setup looks more harmonious than having this knight here. God, wow, oh, it won't let me draw the arrow there. That's dumb. Okay, so anyway, he defends against the threat with c3. Drawback is it's a pawn move, wasting some time. It also weakens the light squares. It would be nice because he's setting up kind of a cool center, right? A strong center. But like I said, it weakens the light squares. Anytime you push a pawn, you have to look at the squares it weakens. And now I can take his center with check. So he no longer has that strong center option. So this basically loses the game for him, this move c3. It was pretty even up to move 14. This guy's rated 1069. He's doing way better than the other players as far as equality, maintaining equality. But after c3, that basically throws the game in one move, strategically, positionally, tactically. And now this knight that was here takes a pawn with check, threatens another pawn, but you don't even need to take that. You can cement that knight with another knight. So he moves his king to put pressure on the knight, trying to force you to do something with it. You could take this pawn. You have to consider that once he attacks you, do you have a place to go? You do. You also can take this, protecting, so it would be safe to take a second pawn. You could defend it another time. It's interesting too, but I'm going to take the second pawn because by removing the b pawn, it severely weakens the dark square diagonal. That b2 pawn was the entire strength behind the c3 pawn, which basically blunts my bishop. But now without that pawn, my bishop is extremely powerful. So I gain more than just the pawn that I gain, right? By taking that pawn, my bishop power level goes from x to x plus 1 or whatever, or plus more, because this is a very weakening move for his dark squares. So he does attack it. You could move your knight and give back a pawn. You could move your knight and just ruin your pawn structure. But I'm going to take this pawn, which protects the knight. And now he has no cover on, no pawns on the dark diagonal, so my bishop just has free mobility, free reign. So I can now retreat my bishop. No big deal. And I'm up 3 pawns. My king is safe. I can castle at any point on either side. I still have 2 pawns in the center, whereas he has 1. My pieces are extremely active, invading his camp. Just these 2 guys alone are creating havoc. And so in an attempt to develop quickly, he develops his last minor piece to its only available square. It's a garbage square. The only reason to put it here is to push f4, so maybe he's threatening to push f4. But I noticed that that weakens these squares. So if I can open his bishop up, that would be able to take this pawn with check. So by moving my knight, I'm basically preventing the idea of f4. So you could do that. You could also play e5. Now that your bishop is outside the pawn chain, you could do that. They're both good options. You could also, just like I said, move the knight. No biggie. I don't know what to do. Everything looks so good, I'm confused. Do I want to do this though? I guess it would make his knight look so dumb, and it would basically say you're never going to get out. Let's just do this. I'm up so much material. Now he hits my bishop, which is protecting the knight. So he's trying to... I don't know what he's trying to do. He's trying to do something. Yeah, e5 was probably dumb, but either way, I should still be fine technically. I had a plan here, but I forgot what it was. I think I was going to take... Yeah, I was going to take the knight. Now that a lot of my pawns are on dark squares, I don't really need the bishop. And then when he takes back, I think I was going to go here trying to win another bishop and give back a pawn. So if I go here, check, and he takes, and I take, and he takes, and then I push, he can't infiltrate with this rook, and that's pretty stifling for him. If I go the other way, that gives him activity, and yeah, I don't want him to target the c-pawn. And so I'm going to blunt it like this, so his rook cannot do anything to our passed pawn. His bishop is stifled by my passed pawn, and he has no entry squares for this rook. I'm up 2 pawns, so I gave back a pawn to create this bind on the dark squares with my pawns. I gave up my dark square bishop, which are now being replaced by pawns. I still have my light square bishop, which can move between my pawns. So you see what I'm trying to create, a nice bind, up 2 pawns, slow roll to, you know, to the dub. So now I need to develop my pieces, improve my pieces. First thing I'm going to do is decrease the power of his and develop my knight, improve my knight, improve my bishop. While attacking his rook, he attacks my knight. I'm just going to improve my bishop. I only have a minute left. That's frightening. I'm just going to lift my king. There's no need to castle since the position's so locked. I'm going to swing my rooks over maybe. I'm noticing there's this check, and in light of time, I'm going to do it. Now he hung his bishop. I'm going to go for that. This does give him a check, but I can hide. And now my king is perfectly safe, and his knight can never check me. Of course, my king is kind of trapped in that sense as well, so you got to be careful. 50 seconds. Let's kick that knight. And maybe just start pushing so I can get my knight back in the game. Yeah, and I really want to get my rooks in the game. Oh, that was an opportunity to do it, actually. But now I can push with check, and now these pawns are extremely strong. I'm not really explaining anything, but you can see why. I'm just going to keep pushing, and then I'm going to bring my rooks in. I'm going to pin this knight, and I'm going to take it. Take the knight, which brings his king back, and I'm going to push these pawns, and he doesn't actually have a threat, right? He can't do anything to my king. I'm going to push this one, because then this happens, and now I'm up stuff. I'm going to bring my knight back real quick. Oh, I should have given it a check. Oh, I still have it because the bishop defends. Now I get to take his rook. Now I get to just go for his pawns with my knight. Oh, well, since he's not going to go for my stuff. Oops. Whatever. And I'm just going to pre-move the victory. And then I'm not going to stalemate him because I have plenty of time now. I don't have like a second. So let's just double check, no stalemates. Now his king's cut off. If he goes up, it's checkmate. If he goes down, it's checkmate in 2. Oh, I need to play 15-minute games because I just can't talk. Like, there's just not enough time because there's so much to say on every move. And then I have to think about like my moves if I want to make any decent ones. Alright, good. We are 9 points higher. We are rated 1016. Hopefully you can see the way my mind works. Hopefully it helps you in your low elo games. Good luck, guys. Submit your rapid games in my Discord. Link is somewhere in the description. Goodbye.